I believe in being, not striving, arriving. You have to be your goal, as it were. You have to not be looking for the truth, you have to be truth. You can't be looking for healing or a healing method out there at all. You have to be truth. And when you are it, it is never something that eludes you. I just had a great experience. On the 1st of January of this year, I quit drinking caffeine. Okay? I had a bad addiction to not Coca-Cola, but Diet Coke, Tab. I could drink a crowd pleaser. Easy. In a speech, I could. Or Diet Pepsi or one of those things, those big 64 ounces. I was drinking 8 to 10 cans of that stuff a day, inadvertently. I just didn't know. I'd have it for breakfast, I'd have it in the afternoon, and I'd always had one when I was driving, and whenever I'd give a speech, I had one. And my wife had said to me, and everybody who knew me was saying to me, that's the thing that's got you. That's the one that you can't get rid of. You talk about being, and it's not good for you. You know how you feel when you drink too much of that stuff. Then I heard a tape by a man named Ram Dass. Ram Dass had a tape about this Buddhist monk who was the son of a Buddhist saint. And this Buddhist saint was a woman. And there's only been like 4 female Buddhist saints ever in the Theravadan Buddhism. And the woman was very upset with her son because he was a narc in Thailand. All right? And in Thailand, they have the highest incidence of heroin addiction in the world. The heroin addicts are on the streets everywhere. The woman would say to her son, instead of imprisoning these people, instead of punishing them, instead of putting them in jail, instead of all of these things that you do, why don't you try to help them? Why don't you send them love? Why don't you, as a saint would say, okay? And he said, but I don't know what to do. And she encouraged him to study Theravadan Buddhism, and he did. And this is the most austere of all of the fields of Buddhism. It is the area of Buddhism in which you have to practice like 130 austerities a day. All right? You don't sleep on a mattress, you sleep on the floor. You don't look at anybody of the opposite sex. You don't dance. You watch every single thing that you eat. You say prayers all the time. A lot of these austerities, physical austerities. Well, he got into it, okay? And he thought that these people were too wild for him, right? So he invented like 30 more austerities of his own. And he was practicing 160 of them a day. And Ram Dass said when he met him, he was like meeting a tree trunk, all right? He was that firm. And what he would do is he would take this truck and he would go through the streets of Bangkok. And he would say to the heroin addicts, if you want to get rid of your addiction in 1 week, 1 week's time, jump on the truck and we'll take you to the monastery and you'll be rid of it in 1 week, guaranteed. He would get these large numbers of people that would jump on. Every week he would take another batch of these addicts. And I'm talking heroin, the hardest thing in the world for us to overcome with will. And he would take them there, and the first thing he would say to them was, this is your only chance. This is the only chance that you're going to have in life to be rid of your addiction. And then he would say to them, I am the treatment. I am bigger than the addiction. And I will show you that. And he would take heroin. And he wouldn't have any effect on him at all. He just wouldn't even react to it. His mind. He had trained himself to be bigger than the addiction and showed them that. And then he would put them through this violent purging, vomiting kind of thing to cleanse out their system and so on. But the thing that he talked about that is the most profound to me is the idea of becoming the treatment, being, the psychology of being. I have taken Maslow's notion of the psychology of being to levels now in my life to challenge myself in areas that I never thought were even possible before. And one of them was with this minor addiction, caffeine, tab. He would laugh. Tab? You're having trouble with tab? I admit it's not major, okay? But nevertheless, for me, it owned me. And I let it own me for over 20 years, all right? This was the stuff that was, it was my last addiction, if you will. Smoking had been something I hadn't had anything to do with for 25 years. And drinking, no part of it. It doesn't interest me. And putting poisons into my body and all of these kind of things. And keeping myself in shape, no problem. It was this this thing that I kept holding on to. So what I did on the 1st of January this year is I re-listened to that tape, and I became the treatment. It's an amazing thing. See, when you take something into your body that you know isn't good for you, or that you don't like, or let's say it's a cigarette if that's what you're trying to quit, or if it's alcohol or caffeine or too much sugar or whatever it is, and you consume that, what happens is, as that goes through you, it becomes you. You become it. You become one with the poison. And every time you do that, you are the poison. You're not consuming poison. You are not using a method of putting poison into your system. It's not that. That's one step removed from being. Being means you are it. It is you. You are one. You are at unity with the poison. All you have to understand with any addiction that you may have, any kind of an addiction, is that once you become the treatment and you stop being the poison, it's not even a challenge anymore. I mean, it's so easy. I'm not that anymore. That's not what I am anymore. Not that I've mastered it or that I've got a method that's great and I want to tell you about this method. It's that I am no longer it. It is no longer me. And I am someplace else now. When you get that, when you understand that notion of being, and beginning to apply that in your life, I mean, it's just phenomenal. It's like in religion, people are looking for the 10 Commandments, okay? But in the Bible, it says, live of the truth, doesn't it? The whole idea of the kingdom of heaven, I mean, that's one of the great secrets of the universe that is so simple. I mean, the kingdom of heaven isn't this place that you're going to get to. It is within. It is what you carry around with you. And when you are the 10 Commandments, you don't need them. You don't need any of that. You simply are being that. And when that is you and you are it, you are what Christ called, of the truth. All right? Not looking for it, not trying to get it from someone else, not hoping that someone else can reveal it to you. It is what you are.
But remember the word coincidence. In mathematics, it's a term that defines angles that coincide. And in mathematics, two angles that coincide are said to be angles that fit together perfectly. And we have taken a term that means something that fits together perfectly and interpret it to mean that is something that fits together and shows up accidentally or in chaos. But actually, anything that is coincidental with something else is a fit that is perfect. And there are no accidents in this universe. When you begin to access a power, you start to have an awareness that it's absurd to believe that in a universe which has an intelligence behind it, that an accident could show up. Everything is a part of the perfection of it. Everything. There are no accidents in this universe. You came in when you were supposed to, you'll leave when you're supposed to. The children that came through you or didn't come through you are all part of that perfection. Questioning it, challenging it, all it does is keep you from accessing the ability to manifest and attract into your life what you really would like to have when you begin to question it. And when you ask, now the question always comes up when I talk about these kinds of things is, well, if there is a force, and this force is a part of the perfection and there are no accidents, at what point do I have a free will? And am I making any of these decisions? And Jung answered that question brilliantly. He said, at the same moment that you are a protagonist in your own life and you're making choices, you are also the spear carrier or the extra in a much larger drama. You are doomed to make choices. And that paradox is something you have to live with. Yes, you are making choices. Yes, you have the capacity to attract into your life virtually anything you want. And yes, there is an intelligence into which you can connect that can access virtually anything you put your attention on. And yes, it's all part of the perfection of the universe. Yes, both of those things you have to live with at the same time. You have to transcend those dichotomies. But I want to speak just for a few moments about what happens when you leave ordinary levels of awareness and you leave these lower energies. When you leave the energy of the solid, where all of your problems occur, when you leave that and move into this energy of spirit, wherein you only have love to give away, as I spoke about earlier, where your response to sadness is always a higher energy of joy, where your response to doubt is always a higher energy of faith, where your response to hatred is always the higher energy of love. When you practice what Francesco taught us in that very famous prayer attributed to St. Francis, what happens when you reach these higher spiritual energies is that you start to access something in which you can see it coming. And you get outside of yourself, as I just spoke about. And that is called intuition. And that intuition is available to you, that you can practice it virtually any time in your life, but you've got to get out of these lower and slower energies because it's not accessible there. It doesn't exist there. Problems exist there. Fear exists there. Worry exists there. Guilt exists there. Hatred exists there. Anger exists there. These are all lower and slower energies. And when you listen to the 10th principle, you'll see that they're not just lower energies, but they weaken us whenever we access them and whenever we use them. But when we get outside of them, we start to get out in front. And now I suggest to you, brazenly, that you don't have to have accidents in your life. That you don't have to be a victim of crime in your life. That you don't have to live in a world of scarcity in your life. You don't have to. If you're willing to take responsibility for whatever acts of crime have come your way without guilt, if you're willing to and just say, I own them, they're mine, I've attracted it for some reason. If you're willing to say, I have had these various accidents and I've attracted that into my life, I don't understand why, but I know that it's mine. If you're willing to say that I've attracted the wrong people into my life, people who have abused me and victimized me, and I have taught people how I'm willing to be treated, and I'm no longer willing to do that, and so I'm going to send out a different attractor energy. If you're willing just to take responsibility without guilt, I underline it, I don't want any letters, okay? I underline it. You do not deserve any of it. You have not been punished for the things that have happened in your life. You just own them. They're yours. Because you can't get past them if you're waiting for something outside of you to change. You get past them by taking responsibility for them. Then what happens is you start seeing an accident coming. And many of you have had that experience. When you are in a higher frequency in your life, and you have an intuitive sense that, I know it's a green light, but I think I better stop. You know, a lot of heads nodding up and down. And something tells you, whatever it might be, something tells you, I better stop and slow down here. And zoom, there goes somebody through a red light, and you stop and you have that feeling that goes through you. You go, what was that? What was that? And you know when you can access that? When you're close to God. When you're in fear, you can't access it. Now, I'm in a 72-year-old body today. I remember being in a 20-year-old body, and a 30-year-old body, and a 40-year-old body. And you can't find one cell of the body that I was in when I was 20 years old, 50 years ago. There's not one cell left. You go out there and I can't find it. It had all kinds of flowing stuff coming out of my head, and it's like... it's gone. You're not doing anything. You're just being done. That's one of the things that the Tao says, that the Tao is just another term for God. The Tao does nothing. It leaves nothing undone. Leaves nothing undone. Makes the planets stay in alignment, the sun comes out, the oceans are filled, there's life that goes on, fish reproduce themselves, roses show up, and there's nobody out there doing anything. It does nothing. So the question of who we are is can't be answered in physical terms, and it can't be answered with the senses. Your senses will lie to you. They will tell you something, and it's just not true, you know. I mean, our senses even tell us right now that we're sitting still when we're hurling through this ocean, right, at 20 knots. But we're also, so is the whole ocean hurling through space at something like 11 or 12,000 miles an hour. And it's also orbiting around the sun and turning on its axis. So it's turning, orbiting, and hurling all at the same moment. And your senses are saying, I'm just sitting here. You don't see with your eyes. You have to see through your eyes. The part of you that is processing what I'm saying here right now has no form to it, has no beginning, it has no end. There's an infinite part of you. There's an invisible part of you. And until you're comfortable with it and know it and understand that it is the creator, the creation takes place through this creative process within you, called your mind, called your thoughts, called your spirit, called your soul. And one of the things that I have learned is that it's necessary to understand what your soul is to follow your excitement. Now hear this. Your excitement is who you are. Just let that in. We're getting very philosophical. I love it when we get like this, especially when I know we have lots of time, so we can just take it, you know, just... Your excitement is who you are. You're not this body. It's the soul. It's this invisibleness. It's what causes you to feel passion. It's following your excitement. And it's something you can do at any time. And when you do, I guarantee you these two things. It will be effortless, and you will always be supported. It's always an effort when you are not following your excitement. What is it in here? What is that creative spark that just makes you want to do something, or you just feel drawn to do it? And the more you pay attention to this spark, this inner excitement, the more it will support you, and you'll find yourself doing amazing things, like really amazing things. Here's what Patanjali, the great 3rd century BC Indian scholar, great beautiful soul who was the father of meditation, one who taught me the japa meditation and the I am meditation. He said, when you are inspired, inspired means in spirit. When you are inspired, that means when you are following your excitement. When you are inspired by some great project, some extraordinary project, all of your thoughts break their bonds. Your mind transcends limitations. Your consciousness expands in every direction. And you find yourself in a new and a great and a wonderful world. And then he said, and this is what I mean by being effortless, he said, dormant forces, faculties and talents come alive, and you discover yourself to be a greater person by far than you ever dreamed yourself to be, or I say were ever taught that you could become, because you were not raised to believe in your divinity.
You were raised, as Rumi said in that thing I read between the Chinese and the Byzantines, you were raised to believe in your limitations. And you don't know that within you, you have God. You are God. God is not an external concept. It's what the ego has taught us that it is. So that if you can answer the question, who am I? Who am I? And understand that who you are is a divine speck, if you will, a divine fragment of the universal consciousness.
God's one and only voice's silence means that God is that which is indivisible. There is no place that God is not. And you can't divide God up and say that God is on this side or God is on that side. I've often said that God isn't doing anything different now than God was doing an hour ago or 100 years ago. And God isn't doing anything different now than he will be doing 1,000 years from now. God is exclusively here and now, not elsewhere, not in heaven someplace apart from us, but here, now, and indivisible. And the word indivisible is very important, because that which is everywhere and cannot be separated or carved up is something that we have a great deal of difficulty in the world of the physical form experiencing and understanding. Because our world, the world of you listening here, is a world of dichotomies. It's a world of paradoxes. We divide everything up. And dichotomies are just our way of being. We divide everything in the world up. The only reason we know that something called darkness exists is because of light. If there was nothing called light, we wouldn't know anything called darkness. The only reason we have a concept called up is because we have something of its reverse called down. You've never seen a person with a front who doesn't have a back. You've never seen a person with an outside who doesn't have an inside. We divide everything. Everything is in the world of the divisible. In the Bhagavad Gita, it speaks about transcending the dichotomies, figuring out a way to get past the up-down, the male-female, the good-bad, the right-wrong, the old, the new, the alive and the dead. Everything has its dichotomy. You can always find its opposites. In fact, that's how the symbolism of language is created, through having opposites. We don't know about oneness in the physical world. Everything has its counterpart, its dichotomy, except for silence. Silence is the only experience that is the same as God. It is indivisible. You take silence, and we'll have some right now, and now let's just cut that in half. And what do we have? More silence. Let's take what we've cut in half and cut it in half again and again. And endlessly you attempt to divide into a dichotomy, silence, but you can never do it, because silence is indivisible. And silence is God's one and only voice. When you go into silence, you go into the place where you make conscious contact with God, whatever it is that God means to you. You make conscious contact with that omnipotent, omniscient force in the world, that omnipresence of God. And the reason I say that it's not crowded along the extra mile is because the mile that most people are on is a very, very noisy mile. And I encourage young people to become more comfortable with silence. We live in a world of bulldozers and leaf blowers and trucks that make endless amounts of noise and chatter. And constantly, I have a home, a place a retreat that I go to frequently on Maui. And oftentimes I will walk in the morning and they're in a big building project in Maui. And I'll go past one building after another and start to count the noisemakers, as all of these machines and all of these people who are trying to make the place look so pristine and so beautiful and so landscaped, instead of just letting it grow, just letting it be. Silence and God are one because you can't divide either one of them, okay? So that going to silence as frequently as you can and understanding that out of silence, everything is created. The words that you are listening to right now as I speak emerge from silence. That silence is the source. And it's the source that is what we want to make conscious contact with. Like the source of all light is the sun. And the only reason we know about light is because of something called darkness. But when you go to the source can't be divided.
Two quotes. The first from the Upanishads, quote, "Life in the world and life in the spirit are not incompatible," unquote. And from Søren Kierkegaard, the great Danish theologian, quote, "The majority of men live without being thoroughly conscious that they are spiritual beings," unquote. Heaven should not be thought of as a place you'll ultimately arrive at once you leave this earthly existence. Rather, it seems to me that you'd want to experience heaven right here on earth. As the title of this chapter suggests from a poem by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, earth itself is crammed with heaven. But do you see heaven in your daily life? Do you feel as if you're in a heavenly world? If the answer is no, then you're out of balance. You've probably made your physical world the primary focus of your life, with little or no attention given to the heavenly part of your earthly existence. What this imbalance looks like. When you place the larger part of your life energy on the material world, you're generally in a continual state of worry about your stuff, and you feel like you'll never get ahead in this game of life. Virtually all of your mental energy is focused on what you have or don't have. You assess your worth based on such material issues as what kind of automobile you drive or how fashionably you're dressed. You may even feel inferior because other people have more stuff. This imbalance between the spiritual and material world usually means that indebtedness is a way of life. You place a heavy emphasis on winning, becoming number one, and comparing yourself to others. A preoccupation with the material aspects of life leads to looking at life in a superficial way, where appearance is viewed as more important than substance. What others think is the most important measuring device, and how you stack up to externally imposed standards becomes all important. All of this anxiety that leads to stress is avoidable if you opt to balance the material-spiritual scale. Just a balance, an even split between these two aspects of yourself, is all you need to achieve. The title of this chapter, Earth's Crammed with Heaven, is meant to signify that it's all right here, right now, not in some other place in a distant future years from now or after the death of your physical self. Heaven is right here, now, at this time, when you find your balance point. Equalizing the balance scale. Heaven is a state of mind, not a location. Since spirit is everywhere and in everything, you can begin equalizing your material and spiritual life by making a conscious decision to look for the unfolding of spirit in everything and everyone that you encounter. I personally do this by making an effort to look upon my world as if I were observing it through lenses that filter out the form and all of the material aspects of what I'm seeing, and I can only view the spiritual energy that allows what I'm noticing to exist. Try putting on these imaginary magical lenses and see how different everything appears. The natural world is a pleasant place to begin this experiment. Nature. When you look at a tree without these imaginary form-fitting lenses, you may see branches, blossoms, leaves, and perhaps mangoes or plums. With your enchanting new lenses, the lines that form tree boundaries dissolve, and there's an energy vibrating so fast that it gives a whole new perspective of the tree. You see the spaces between the leaves, and notice the silence of the now defunct acorn or mango pit out of which the first sprout of creation emerged, jump-starting the whole process that eventually became the tree you're looking at. You see the continuation of this life-giving process residing deep within the tree that lets it sleep in the winter and blossom in the spring, or into infinity, or at least for the duration of its life. You realize that new mangoes are producing not only new fruit, but an infinity of mango trees as well. You see this life force in just one tree extending backward and forward in a never-ending stream of creation. Begin looking at all of nature with this new vision. Birds, ants, lakes, mountains, clouds, stars, all of it. Deepen your vision so that you no longer see only form and boundaries. Appreciate the miracle that is your environment. As you do so, you're getting into balance. People. These new lenses allow you to see everyone in a fresh perspective. You're no longer seeing tall and short, dark and light, male and female, old and young, beautiful and homely. Your lenses blur the lines that categorize people by cultural or religious differences, and you don't see others as only their attire or physical appearances or the language they speak. All appearances dissolve through filters in your lenses and your thoughts, so you now see the unfolding of the spiritual energy in every person you encounter. What you notice is pure love vibrating right before your eyes. You see kindness personified. You see and feel the same vulnerabilities in all others that you feel within yourself. You see enormous strands of peaceful, glimmering energy connecting each of us. Your new outlook invites you to playfully imagine that 2 people created you, and 4 people created the 2 people who created you, and 8 people created the 4 people who created the 2 people who created you. As we go back a few more generations to the time of Abraham Lincoln, there are 16,000 people you're related to who had to come together to create you. We can imagine going back to the time of Socrates and puzzle over the apparent math we come up with. Trillions of people were needed to create one of us, but trillions of people haven't even existed, so somehow, in some mathematically puzzling way, we're all related to each other. These are the kinds of fascinating connections that you can begin to observe with your imaginary lenses, transforming your thoughts. You discover that there's no one to judge, no one to hate, and no one to harm, because you see clearly that we're related. In fact, we're all one. From here, you can extend your perspective to include all of life. Events. Where you once viewed the comings and goings of people as pure happenstance in current time shaping the events of your life and the lives of everyone else, your new filtering lenses allow you to see how all of these things are connected energetically. Now you see an infinite network of laser-like energies emanating from the thoughts of everyone, blending the events in everyone's life in energetic perfection. You see people with very fast vibrations of energy matching up perfectly with the energy of the source of creation. You see how they attune with the all-creating, all-knowing source of life, and how events are perfectly attracted in a vibrational match. You also see what appears to be accidents, tragedies, and horrors, and how they, too, are vibrational matches that collide in what you've called mistakes, but are really the result of 2 or more energies meeting in a larger picture that you couldn't previously see. You witness the connection between the expectations of individuals and what they attract into their lives. With these amazing lenses, you note that all events and all accidental encounters are really incredibly compatible vibrational matches rather than randomly occurring situations. With this awareness, you're attaining a level of balance between spirit and form.